how you make that work.
Okay, so let me kick this live. YouTube just went live, so we're just about ready here. Those of you on Facebook, sorry you've been waiting here. I'm all thumbs this afternoon. We'll tell you why. So hang on. All right, let me click this button and we'll go. Hey everyone, welcome to the new media show. My name is Todd Cochran. Of course, I'm joined by my co-host, Mr. Rob Greenlee. How you doing, Rob?
Hey, doing great, Todd. Boy, I had the words wrong there.
That's okay.
But yeah, you're right. I mean, you were making some comments before we were fully live about how crazy busy. I know we had our IAB call today as well. So lots of stuff going on. Yeah. Hard to keep up with. And I'm trying to get my teleprompter to work here. So which is also scrambling my brain.
And I've been distracted for about the last 30 minutes because SpaceX is going to launch their Starship today to an altitude of 5, but the SpaceX stream is not up yet. And that's usually an indication they're 4 or 5 minutes from launch. And this other guy's got 70,000 people watching his live stream. He's been live for 2 hours. 70,000 people are live on his stream, not even the SpaceX stream.
Wow.
So I don't know.
Yeah, so how did he get access to that?
Well, he's 5 miles out with a camera, I guess. So, or he's got access to a feed. I don't know, but 70,000 people are there to watch a test launch.
Wow.
Well, you know what that could mean, right?
Kaboom.
Right. Either that succeeds or blows. Yesterday they tried this and they got to 0 and nothing happened.
I think it got down to 1 is what I thought.
1, and then
never progressed to 0.
Yeah, never progressed to 0. The computer, well, one of the Merlin engines said, "I'm not going today. I'm not ready."
I need a day off. Yeah.
So anyway, so I'm I've got this. For those of you that are watching the stream, I've got it opened up here in a browser on the computer, so to see when it goes, but. Anyway, we're not here to talk about SpaceX, although this is the vehicle. If they succeed in getting this thing to the point where it's ready, that's what they're taking to Mars.
Yeah.
Rob, we might live to see it.
Todd, I hate to say this, but did you see the article on NBC News yesterday that some scientist that is I believe in the UK, came out saying that we already have a base on Mars. Okay, well, this is not a conspiracy theory show. No, it's not. It's not. But
even though even though I do I have a conspiracy theory team as part of my Geek News Central show where we go over 2 or 3 hilarious conspiracies or who knows.
Well, supposedly the U.S. has signed a treaty with aliens, and we have an underground base on Mars. This was in the mainstream media yesterday. So, yeah.
Considering some of the things I saw and I've seen during my lifetime, I'm not going to put that outside the possibilities that it happened. But I want we get a lot of questions in our live chat. I mean, it just goes crazy. People are, but I want to show you. Well, you can't see it, but the 71,000 people that's on this guy's live stream, the comments are going so fast.
You can't read them, right?
You can't read them. Dun. And anyway, this guy's got the super chat feature on YouTube. We will probably never achieve the ability to get super chat. If we did, we could actually. I saw someone on super chat the other day make like $5,000 in an hour. So that's how people are.
Does Adam Curry ever do his show live?
Yeah, he's live. He streams it live.
Oh, he does do it live. Okay,
audio only.
He's doing it live. Yeah.
Yeah.
So
audio only.
I would imagine that kind of a show could have a real active live chat stream.
Yeah.
Going.
Oh, I'm sure. Right. And it could probably be potentially very valuable. But by the way, for those that have emailed me about my Red Bull drinking, no, they are not sponsored. And I only drink 2 to 3 a week, and it's usually during or before a show.
Right.
So
you can bring the energy, right?
Well, and these things are absolutely horrible for you. If I'm going to dive anything, it's going to be from drinking Red Bulls. I probably won't get an endorsement for Red Bull for just saying that, but
you don't have one right now, so I wouldn't worry.
Here we go.
Right.
Have to delete this episode later. So what's going on in podcasting?
Well, yesterday was another Edison live webinar of sorts with Norm Patitz and a representative from the I believe Ad Results. Those were the sponsor of the Super Listener study that Edison has been doing for a few years now, that talks about deep diving into podcast listeners that are, heavy listeners and what's going on with them and what's the trend lines of their consumption patterns as you look comparatively, like maybe since 2014 to 2020, and it shows some changes on that. I think that some takeaways that were significant. It says that 56% of heavy podcast listeners think that the number of ads in podcasts is increasing, and 38% believe there are already too many ads.
Well, we've been talking about that already with the ad load on some of these platforms.
Right.
That's the thing. We can spend an hour on that point alone. How many ads can you have before it becomes radio?
Right.
And
yeah, well, that's, on the webinar yesterday, we had Mr. Norm Patitz, Podcast One, was on the calls along with Tom Webster and the representative from the Ad Results. I can't remember his name. I'm drawing a blank on his name right now, but that was, they were kind of toning that down from the standpoint of the contention that Norm had is that since podcasting audiences have been growing so much lately, that he thinks that the expectation around advertising in podcasts wasn't set from the past, right? So as you look at the history of podcasting, there's pretty much always been a low tolerance for advertising.
Right.
Podcasts, his contention is that as we pull more listeners from radio, the incremental less advertising is what he was pointing to. So instead of 16 minutes, and this is kind of his bigger point, 16 minutes per hour of advertising, it's okay to have podcasts with maybe 8 minutes or something. I mean, I think you follow what I'm trying to say here.
Yeah.
Is that somehow, there's a value in the fact that there's less. Not that we have a problem with there's too much in there now. So anyway.
Well, so if I think about my ad load when I was running 3 ads,
mm-hmm.
in an hour, 10 minutes, 70-minute show is when the average is when I was running 3 ad load. It was, and of course, I'm always long-winded in each of my ads, so I was probably running 6 minutes of ads in 70 minutes. And I'll be honest with you, that was the absolute, if I was running 2 ads, my listener numbers continue to stay steady.
Right.
And actually increase. But if I was running 3, I actually had people drop off. Mm-hmm. I lost audience with 3 ad spots.
I mean, Norm probably has a little bit of a point here that the early podcast listeners, I think, were a little bit more sensitive to advertising in podcasts than maybe the current listeners, though, and you can see that in the numbers also, that they said listeners felt more positive about the ads than in previous years. So I guess what that means is that the ads that are being placed in the most popular podcasts is what I would be saying here is host reads, essentially, that people are fairly positive about those ads. And I believe that's because they are host reads, right? that they're more organic, more believable, more authentic type of presentations of sponsors, and I would imagine also that there's a better alignment with those advertisers with the interest levels of the listeners to those programs too.
So let's define a super listener. Now I'm just going to load, and thanks for the link, Rob, Edison's slide here. 1,000 online interviews. In October 2020, all respondents reported listening to a podcast for at least 5 hours per week. Data was weighted by age, sex, and race, reflected demographic of weekly podcast listeners as found in the Infinite Dial 2020.
So which slide are you looking at right now?
I'm looking at slide number...
Yeah, I don't have them numbered.
I don't. So. They're not numbered, but it also talked about the gender breakup. Right. And super listener demographics, gender were by male were 56-44 in 2019.
19, yeah.
And 58-42 in 2020, which are going the wrong way.
Right.
And then the age bracket, this is interesting, 2020, 21% 18 to 24, 20% 25 to 34, 21% 35 to 44, 14% 45 to 54, and wow, 20% 55 plus. Now, this is what I've continued to say. This 55 plus demographic, I think, is often under-recognized and underappreciated.
You have to think about a lot of the early listeners to podcasts were probably in the 30s, right?
Right.
And since then, they're kind of moving. So you had this huge number of listeners to podcasts that have been listening for a long time that are all kind of piling up in that now. But the number above that around the change in gender, there may be a little bit to do with between those two slides. Maybe the decrease in female listeners was disproportionately increased by the increase in male older men too. I don't know. Yeah.
But it is an interesting breakdown here that we're pretty close across these 20, 24, 21, 14, and 20.
Right.
And again, it's 1,000 respondents, so it's still like, it's a great sample. I think that is that's an interesting base. The 18 to 24 range has got me pretty impressed because
that's the most significant thing, I believe, is that number.
Because if you get 21% of 18 to 24-year-olds to listen to 5 hours, now, you think about the competition out there right now for your eyes and your ears, your earballs.
Right.
We've got TikTok. We've got YouTube. I'm watching as much YouTube as I'm listening to podcasts right now.
Right.
And streaming music is another thing that's competing for their time. I would say all the way up, people are, we've all been home. So, what have I been doing, here even in the studio? I've put on Apple Music and played Apple Music for a couple hours, usually every day.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm.
I don't have the television on because I just want to puke anytime I see any TV. So I guess, and TikTok and YouTube and all this other stuff that that's a pretty amazing percentage for that, even the 18 to 34 year range. Because, let's be frank.
That's 45%.
Yeah. And that's the hip kids, right? So I guess I can shouldn't call them kids, but that's the hip group, that are. So that's real.
It's the young people that are setting trends for the future there, right?
And we look at the demographics then, if we break that down, 2020, 71% white, 10% Hispanic, 13% Asian. Oh, no, excuse me. 71% white, 10% African American, 13% Hispanic, Asian 5%, other 1%. Now look at that Asian category.
Yeah.
The number of folks.
That's the big growth area.
That's huge. Did I get that right? White? No.
The underrepresented.
The Hispanic category. Oh my God, I'm reading this wrong. Yeah, the Hispanic category is blown out.
Right.
You know?
Oh yeah, it's a Hispanic. The reason that we're getting this messed up is that the reference titles is off centered from.
Yeah. So I was looking at the color code wrong, but compared to, and there's not a big difference in the white category, and the African American category didn't change that much, but definitely. Yeah. But I think
Hispanic changed a lot.
Yeah, but that's to be expected. We've been hearing a lot about Spanish language podcasts.
Right.
A lot. So
it's a big development.
It's a big, it's big. So I think from that perspective, and I'm, what surprises me probably the most, and I'll go back up to this, is the split on the men and women, 58 to 42. I thought we were closer to parity on the men. Maybe we'll have to go back to his other study and look at the split between men and women on average podcast listeners, not super listeners. But let's think about this. And I don't want to be stereotypical.
Super listeners, but I think you might see that's a little bit of a skewed number. I think if you were to look at more broadly,
right. I think
podcast listener numbers, the definition of a super listener,
is 5 hours or more,
maybe excluding a big chunk of female listeners that are not super listeners.
And if you think about this year, 2020, let's again, I don't want to be stereotypical, but moms are home with the kids. Now, husband might be too, or single moms, but their time. They don't have a lot of time right now. They're crushed because their kids are being homeschooling. They're homeschooling and all this other stuff.
Right.
So, but it's not a big difference between 2019 and 2020. So I might be wrong there in my assumption. So maybe we get Tom sometime if Tom's watching, maybe he can weigh in. But it is curious. Now, Here's the wow, look at this breakdown.
Yeah, are you looking at the weekly time spent listening?
Yeah.
27%
listen 5 to 6 hours. 23% listen 6 to 8. 24% listen 8 to 12, and 26% listen 12 hours or more. The mean is 10.5. So the mean has went up from 9.8 to 10.5, but I listen to an incredibly huge number of podcasts. But I don't know if I get 12 hours a week.
Yeah.
I might get 7 or 8 hours a week in.
Mm-hmm. We did see a drop, though, coming from last year, and people listening 8 to 12. It went from 32 down to 24. So that was the biggest drop.
And the biggest increase was 5 to 6.
Right, which is less listening, which makes sense if you have a lot of new people entering that super listener category, which I believe we've probably been having.
Sure.
That makes sense, and they'll probably work their way up that chart to some point. But it does look like they've kind of capped out at the 8 to 12.
Yeah.
As far as growth. Right.
Now, let me go back here. Where did that slide go? Oh, here it is. How important is it to you to watch, listen to programs whenever you want?
Whenever you want, not wherever. Whenever.
Whenever you want.
Whenever. Right.
See,
that's a time shift. Yeah.
So is this their way of trying to say how important subscribing is? How important is it to watch, listen to programs whenever you want? So time shift. 44%, very important.
It's the on-demand question, right?
Yeah.
Right.
29% important. So that still leaves you with, let me do my high school math here. So 69, 73, is that the right number? So, yeah, 73%. It was right there on the screen. Duh. 73%, very important or important.
Right.
So that leaves the rest of them that's not so important.
I mean, I'm surprised this isn't
90.
100%.
Right. Because we're all doing that.
Right.
Here's
I mean, that's what we're doing with most of the other media that we're listening to now, right? Or watching.
You want to hear? Okay, Rob. This is how old habits stick. Right. So there's a new show I'm watching on YouTube that comes out Monday and Friday, and then there's another show I watch that comes out on Thursday. And I've learned their schedule.
Yeah.
And because I know I'm going to watch this specific show on Friday. I know I'm going to watch this specific show on Tuesday. But I built them into my schedule just like it would regular television.
Yeah.
Because I want to watch it. I'm ready to listen to it. And I think podcasters are the same, podcast listeners are the same way. They know that shows come out in a specific time frame and build that into their schedule. So now I probably screw them on this show because sometimes I'm a day late, sometimes I'm 2 days late in getting the last episode published. But this says something here. Now let me go and scroll down. It says, how important is it to you to watch, listen to programs? Oh, wherever you want.
That's a location question.
Wherever you want. 38 and 26, 64. Huh.
Yeah.
All right, let's go down. How important is it to watch, listen, unique content that you cannot get elsewhere? 63%. 34.29.
Yeah, that's a pitch for uniqueness against other content out there.
Well,
right?
Every podcast is unique.
Yeah.
Yep.
I mean, I would say that number, I'm surprised, isn't higher as well. Unless, yeah. What's the inverse of that? They don't want to. Unique content is important.
I don't know what the other two questions were.
Right.
Very important, not important. What would be the other question? Not important, maybe. Very important. You're in the middle of the road and not important. Does that get 4? We don't have the other question.
So unique against what though? You're unique against
right.
Radio, unique against television.
Well, no, they're asking a general question here. How important is it to watch, listen? The keyword is watch, listen to unique content that you cannot get elsewhere. So,
right. That's true.
It's still big. Now let's go down here. Well, this next part moves into advertising. So, is there anything else here that we want to highlight before we move on to that?
I'm just trying to piece together what it means for a content producer. How do you need to think differently based on what we're seeing here?
But the question is, how much of the podcasting listener ecosphere is super listeners?
I think the numbers we've seen is around, I think that's the top slide, Todd, and I think we skipped through that. If you look at the very top, it says share of time spent listening to audio sources, and it breaks it out.
All right, so share of time spent listening to audio
sources.
I don't know if that gets us there because it says share of time spent,
I think.
AM, FM, but this is share podcast versus again. Okay, let me go down to the next slide.
Podcasts have almost tripled in their importance
since
2014. That's not compared to last year.
But if you remember share of ear, the average listener was like 5 or 6 hours, right? Wasn't that the average listener was 5 or 6 hours?
Or I think it was 5 or 6 subscriptions.
Oh.
I think is what that number was.
I'm
not sure that we had.
I thought it was like 6 point something, but maybe we need Tom to help us out here. But
yeah,
Yeah. So, Tom, what defines, you're not listening, you're not live with us. What defines a super listener? Well, okay, here it is, Rob. A super listener, someone who listens 5 hours plus of content.
Yeah, base minimum. Right.
Base minimum, right? They listen to at least 5 hours. So would that person be considered in the radio jargon the P1? P1 listener?
I would say so, yeah.
So 5 hours typically will mean they're probably listening to, well, if they're listening to Joe Rogan, it's only two or three shows. But if they're not listening to Joe Rogan of course, Joe Rogan's no longer a podcast.
Though I think we should talk about that topic too at some point.
Yeah, we can. Hey, put it write it down on your little notepad if you have one. Like we don't do any show planning. So 5 hours plus is a super listener. Now I guess we'll go down here. Tom, what I need to know is what percentage of podcast listeners are considered super listeners. Hey, Rob, you want to catch a train? All right. In the last week, have you seen or heard advertising in any of the following places? Podcasts, 85 to 86%. Now, what disturbs me a little bit about this number is this means that these folks are listening mostly to the top 5 to 6% of shows. Because if they were listening to one of the thousands, tens of thousands, hundreds of thousands of shows that don't have any advertising in it, that number would be much, much lower.
Right.
But according to, again, they were talking to podcast listeners.
Right.
So 86%. See, that was the highest in all categories. So if I read down this list, 86% saw an advertisement or listened to an advertisement in a podcast. How can a website advertisement be 7? Everyone sees ads on websites. Everyone. If you're on Facebook, you see it. So that number should be 100. Social media, that number should be close to 100.
People are, like they've always said, Todd, people are ignoring ads on websites.
They are. That's true. Live and recorded television, 71. Streaming television, 69. AM/FM radio, 66%. Streaming radio, 60%. Right. Magazines and newspapers. Rob, do you get any magazines anymore?
They're catalogs, not magazines.
Now,
right? Mainly.
I got a copy of the latest podcast magazine because I was interviewed in it. They sent me one. That's the only magazine I probably bought or didn't even buy. They gave it to me in a year.
Right.
So,
yeah, keep in mind these are super listeners.
Yeah.
So they listen to at least 5 or more hours per week.
Yeah.
So they are filtering it through. So it's safe to say that the podcasts that a large percentage of these surveyed people are listening to predominantly podcasts that have advertising in them.
And this backs up
which is usually larger shows.
And this backs up a lot of things of what we have been hearing recently. There was another group that came out and said there was too many, or maybe it was derived from the study, but we're hearing about podcast advertising being the place to reach people that are ignoring advertising somewhere else. We've said, here's the thing that blows me away. I'll have to dig out some slides. I got some slides from like 2006, 2007.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm.
And I think I can almost picture it. Oh, I wish I could find it. I basically said it was a pitch deck for when I was going every 3 months and doing media buyer calls and, doing everything you have to do to run a higher amount of advertising. It was basically, I was saying to the media buyers, you're reaching an audience that has cut the cord. Now, cutting the cord now is everyone's cut the cord. But in 2006, 2007, cutting the cord was not a thing. So I was saying, listen, these people who listen to podcasts have already disconnected from this,
Right.
this, and this.
Yeah.
And yet now we're starting to see people realize, oh my God, we're starting to reach. It's a revelation. Oh yeah. Oh my goodness. It's almost like this all of a sudden this they've had this wake up moment saying, hey, you can reach listeners through advertising that you haven't been able to in other stores. I'm like, duh.
That's right. For a decade now. Right.
Duh.
Yeah.
And you're just learning this?
Right. Yeah. Yeah. I think that the big issue now, I think, is competing platforms on the, as you think about the TV, right?
Yeah.
I mean, I still have cable television, live television connection,
Why?
but I also have my TV has Roku built into it,
Right.
It's not an external thing. It's built into the TV.
Sure,
It's
sure.
running Android. And then I also have an Apple TV connected. And then I have a cable box connected, and it has connections to Netflix and YouTube and all these others as well. So I've got currently 3 different access points to get to the same content.
Well,
on my TV.
I tease you about not having cut the cord, but I was forced to take a triple play deal here in my office, and I think I get 13 television channels. They're all news. They all suck. And then at home, at the compound, at the loft, I like how I say that, compound loft. People visit my place, they'll understand why I say that.
Right.
Is that sure, I cut cable.
Right.
Well, there's no cable where I live. You get Dish. My mom and my sister have Dish. I don't have Dish.
Mm-hmm.
So I can watch, like I have a YouTube TV subscription. I have a Hulu subscription, or actually my daughter does. I use hers. I have a Netflix subscription, and then Disney Plus.
So you probably have Amazon Prime, right?
And I have Amazon
Also?
Prime. So you start adding those all up, and it's like I'm still spending $120, $130 a month.
Right.
That's
so what the TV industry was trying to do.
Well, they
get people
very
to spend as much, but
very successful.
Right.
So every year in January, I take a look at all these things. I decide what I'm going to cut out. And for me, at this point, YouTube TV is probably going to go, because I once a week tune into YouTube TV, and that's it. So probably YouTube TV will go away, and I've got HBO too, HBO Max. So you're paying one way or the other right now. We're all just slaves to these media companies. But I think that my viewing habits have completely changed since I've moved back to Michigan. Completely changed.
Right.
And so anyway, let's finish up the study. Compared to 1 year ago, do you think that the total number of ads in the podcast you regularly listen to has
increased or stayed the same?
Increased. 56% said they increased. 40% said they stayed the same.
And 4% said that
They
they
decreased. Yeah, I'm not surprised. Ad load. I listened to a podcast the other day that was 22 minutes and it had 7 ads.
Right.
Had 3 pre-rolls, 2 mids, and 2 post. Of course, who listens to the post?
Right.
But 7. So how much more can you push people? And what is happening?
That number 38% that I mentioned earlier of people that believe there's already too many, if you compare that to, I believe the prior year, it was a significant jump.
Really?
In people's perception of that, right?
Well, we only see the 2019 number, 4949, from this study. And by the way, everyone, we are looking at the Edison Research Super Listener Study 2020 that was sponsored by Podcast One and Ad Results. So let's look at this next one. compared to 1 year ago, do you think the length of the average advertising break in the podcast you regularly listen to has gotten longer, stayed about the same, gotten shorter? It went from 35 to 41, getting longer, 59 to 50, stayed about the same, and 6% to 9%, getting shorter. So people think, by and large, that the ads have gotten longer.
Yeah.
Wow. My audience already knows 2 minutes. When I do GoDaddy, it's a minute and a half, 2 minutes.
Well, I mean, it's if we're growing this industry off of host reads, live reads, they tend to be a little longer, and
right.
That's not always a bad thing.
And well, some networks are, I've actually done some stopwatch stuff. Tick, 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 and see, okay, did they get? Because that's the secret in determining if it was a read or host endorsement, because a read will come in at 60 seconds.
And it'll stop at 60.
Right. A host endorsement.
Especially if it's pre-recorded.
Right.
Usually. Right.
Trade secret here. A host read will come in all over the place. It may go minute 20, minute 15, minute 30, sometimes 3 minutes, sometimes 40 seconds.
I think it depends on if it's read live in the show or if it's pre-recorded.
Or if it's conversation.
Right.
Right.
Or if conversation is part of it.
Right.
So if you have a co-host and you can have a banter back and forth about a particular sponsor or advertiser, which happens sometimes.
By the way, Rob.
Yeah.
We got a lot of reaction. People were sending me emails, said that I embarrassed you on the last show. They think that the email was, the emails were, did Rob turn red when we talked about manscaping?
Yeah, I was laughing so hard. That's why.
Oh yeah, you weren't laughing. You were a little nervous.
Uh-oh.
Yeah, so anyway, that was some feedback we got, was from some of our live listeners as well.
I'm this innocent guy out here, this manscaping thing.
Yeah.
Yeah.
So anyway, going back to our study here.
Right.
Compared to a year ago.
Anecdote.
Yeah. Compared to a year ago, again, advertising breaks are perceived to be longer. Now, how important is it to you to limit your exposure to advertising? Wow. This is a really interesting number. 27% say very important. 23% said important. Now, those number changes are
not
significant change.
Different. Right.
Yeah. Huh. Wow. I think I personally, when I'm listening to podcasts, I don't fast forward through them because I want to hear them. At the same time, my perspective is a little bit different than a listener's, because I'm coming from a business perspective.
Right.
So,
though I will say that ranking there is not skewing in the right direction. It's up 2% on the very important in limiting your exposure, right?
So
right.
I think he's going to get this. What I'm thinking about is how many people are leaving shows because of the ad load. Now, I don't know if they ask it in the study here, but I think this next question may address some of that. Which of the following statements best describes how often you skip past the advertising breaks in the podcast you listen to most often? 33%, very rarely, never skip ads. 38%, you skip ads some of the time. 17%, you skip ads most of the time, but not always. 12%, you skip always. So that number hasn't changed. So really not much. Well, there's more people that are skipping ads some of the time. That's up 5%.
Right. And you would expect that as ad loads go up.
Yeah.
Right?
Yeah. So, I want to know how many people have left a show because the ad loads got too high.
Yeah.
All right. So,
Okay, I think this next one maybe addresses that a little bit.
Relative to other types of media, there are way too many ads on. Okay, now let me read that again. Relative to other types of media, there are way too many ads on. Well, they say social media,
Such, right.
59%.
Right.
No. I strongly agree, and it's broken down. Well, this blows me away.
Yeah, so podcasts are still considered a medium that's
Low on
fairly
ads.
low in advertising load, right?
Wow.
Is what this says. Compared to streaming television, compared to magazines, radio, streaming radio, websites, television, and social media, which social media is the number one, right?
Yeah.
Has way too many ads.
Now, they did put an antidote at the bottom of this. In 2020, the combined number between strongly agree and agree was 38%. In 2019, 24%. So there was a massive jump.
Yeah, that's what I was referring to earlier about that 38% believe that there are already too many.
Yeah.
Compare that to last year, that's up 14%.
Yep.
Right. That's a big jump.
Here's a solution to the media buyers or anyone that has any influence of media buyers. There's lots of inventory. There are thousands, tens of thousands of shows that have no advertising in them whatsoever. You can't continue to cram your entire budget in these top 5% of shows.
Right. Yeah, I would say that this is a little bit of a warning bell to the advertising industry and podcasts that having a 14% jump in 1 year in people feeling that there's too many ads in podcasts is not a good trend line. If that continues, we're going to be considered just like, these other media types.
Guess what, Rob? It means we don't have enough diversity in advertising and podcasting. Whoa, it went there.
Enough diversity in...
Okay. Well, you think about it. It doesn't necessarily... diversity meaning in shows, not in diversity in color, but a diversity in shows. So if you have too much ad load in the top shows...
In a small number of shows.
In a small number of shows, it means that in order to bring this number down and to spread the wealth...
You got to buy against larger numbers of shows.
That's right. Have a more and non-duplicative audience. This is the thing. They're idiots. They don't. What happened here? They're idiots. They don't understand that these are largely non-duplicative audiences. So they're just missing out on hundreds of millions of listeners that are
because they're buying small numbers of shows.
Right. And again, Rob, guess what? It's okay. Boom, punch him in the face. I'm punching media buyers in the face. All right. So if you're watching the live stream, I'm punching in the face. What you're missing out on again, and I'm preaching to the choir here because everyone that's listening know this, is that you're reaching an audience that you can't reach otherwise.
Right.
And you're leaving hundreds of millions of listeners on the non-reachable shelf.
Right, and to the rescue, who the argument is or what the argument is to the rescue on this topic is programmatic, right?
Oh, whatever.
Yeah, okay. To the rescue of this, right?
Yep.
Because you can run automated campaigns across large numbers of shows. The problem is there's problems with that, right?
That's right. So we all can scale. There's no problem. Libsyn can scale. Blueberry can scale. Podbeans can scale. Come on. Bring us the RFPs.
Right.
But the problem with the RFPs I've been getting lately, it's just, they want such a niche audience. I mean, like really, really super niche.
Well, that's the fallout from targeting, right?
Right.
That's where we run into problems.
They want this super...
We're parsing audiences.
They want this super niche show. And I told them, I said, I can't put a campaign big enough even to make it worth my time.
Right.
You've narrowed it so tight. And I said, I said, yeah, we can advertise in those 10 shows. It's going to cost you $5,000 a month to advertise in those 10 shows. And by the way, not that I'm telling them, but I know what those show sizes are, and they would make a lot of money. But yet the advertiser then would come back to, we didn't have good performance.
Yeah.
Well,
if you're going to narrow your target down that fine, that CPM rate needs to go up.
I took it to like astronomical ranges on CPM because that
you can't make it, right.
And my minimum spend is $5,000 a month.
Why do it for small CPMs?
Not only that, and podcasters get mad when I say this, but when an advertiser comes in to Blueberry and they say, we want to run a campaign and our budget's $1,000 a month. I do the same amount of work for a campaign that's $1,000 a month as I do for a campaign that's $5,000 a month. And 90% of the time, the person that's spending $1,000 a month is going to be calling me 3 times a week, complaining and freaking out about their budget. So I always say, I'm always nice about it. I said, listen, you didn't meet our minimum spend. Here's 10 shows that you should go talk to. And I send them direct to the podcast.
Right.
I want them to spend money in podcasting. I just don't want to do it for $1,000 a month. So $5,000 being the minimum spend that we do for a campaign. When they want this super tight, narrow.
Yeah.
And the big problem too is I can't segment by country right now easily. I can't tell who Australia originating podcast. We've talked about this on the show already.
Yeah.
And hopefully the podcast initiative that M. Curry's doing will help us fix some of this stuff. But we got to get players to participate. But all right. So anyway, it all points to there are concerns about load. All right. So let's move on to the next.
And we're not spreading the inventory across a large enough number of shows to disperse that.
Yep. Now, here's a good thing. Podcast advertising, agree, disagree, 2019, 44%, 2020, 49%, agree to. Your opinion of a company is more positive when you hear it mentioned on a podcast you regularly listen to. I think that's true.
That's called brand lift. That's what they call that.
Well, I tell my listeners, they keep the lights on. They pay the insurance. They pay my gas bill. They pay my rent. I want you to appreciate them and show your appreciation by going and buying the product. Of course, my audience is going to say they keep Dad allows Todd to keep the lights on and do what he needs to do in his little studio.
But the ads need to be done well, though, in order to get this percentage.
I think the ads. No, I don't think so.
Really?
I think
they could be sloppily done and still have this opinion.
But is anybody really doing sloppy ads? You don't do sloppy ads and get renewed. So
that's true. I agree with that.
So what it really is, if a podcaster, I know a few podcasters that despise the advertising that they run and really, but yet they're such big names, they get advertising anyway. I think there's podcasters out there that are truly, truly appreciative of a company that comes and sponsors their show. And that comes through because they're getting, that podcasters getting a sustainable potentially income. So they're going to be, it's just like, all right, Rob, if I gave you $500 a show to be on this podcast, you would be very appreciable, right?
Of course.
Now, we both don't do that. We don't get paid nothing. We get a few donations here and there that we use for the bandwidth bill, or not the bandwidth bill, because I get that for free from Blueberry, but the streaming bill, I put that on. So, it's a different thing here. But if we were doing a regular show that we had full-time sponsors in, and you and I were getting paid for that, I'm sure you and I would both be appreciative. And guess what? I think the audience would be too. So I think this is where this comes from. Maybe.
Yeah, I think it comes from that. And then this next slide talks about the the percentage of people that think that the hosts of the podcasts actually are actual users of the products and services mentioned in the podcast. And that's actually gone up from 41% to 45%, which is interesting. I would have thought that the number would have been higher than that prior.
So, there's a lot of podcasters that promote stuff that never use it.
Right. But if you think back to the origins of this medium, that wasn't the case. I mean,
wasn't the case. I know a certain high profile, very, very high profile podcaster, well regarded. I mean, he's like he's a top notch dude in the space, and he promotes a certain podcast host exclusively, but doesn't use them.
Right.
You know,
I mean, in the earlier days,
do as I say,
medium,
not as I do. Right. Do as I say, not as I do.
Right.
You know,
I mean, if you're going to have credibility with your audience, you got to stand behind what you endorse.
That's right.
That's somewhat how things have changed, and it's interesting to me that number is was in 2019 only 41%. I'm curious what it was in 2018.
Yeah.
Was it more or less than that?
So
I don't know.
I keep going back to my example. I tell my audience all the time, if you have a problem with GoDaddy, you email me and let me know, because I have a direct contact in the office of the president. I will email them directly, and they will figure out why you didn't get fixed.
Right.
You know, and how many times does that come up? In 15 years, maybe half dozen, maybe a dozen times. And guess what's happened? Every time I've sent that email off to the office of the president of GoDaddy, and it gets worked immediately. And the audience knows. So,
but to some degree, you do have to be a little practical about this. I mean, some advertisers, I know some of the early, like Casper or whatever, those type of bed advertisers, they would actually ship a bed out to the podcast host. Right.
Yeah.
For them to sleep on.
I got one.
Yeah. And I don't know, as you think about the future of this medium, some products, maybe that's not practical to do that. Others, definitely that the advertiser should do it. Let's say you get Mercedes-Benz to sponsor your show. Do you expect them to send you a Mercedes-Benz? I guess you could have one to drive around for a week or something.
Well,
right?
Ford did that.
Yeah.
So SpaceX is getting very, very close here, Rob. The rocket's venting. SpaceX has said they're going to come live in about a minute and a half. So that probably means we're about 4 minutes from this thing.
Blast off.
Yes. So let me Twitter.
Blast off or blow up, one of the two.
Yeah, let me twitter.com. Oh, they have not updated their Twitter page. Well, I will keep an eye on this, and we can. You have to load it up yourself to watch the launch, but I got distracted here. So I'll tell you my story about Casper. I got the Casper mattress. We put it up in one of the kids' rooms. This is when I was in Hawaii. And
this is not a sponsor endorsement.
No
advertisement.
No. Right? So anyway, it expanded out after it coming in small box. That was probably the coolest thing about it. And I tried to sleep in it for 2 days.
You tried.
Now, I'm about 190. Probably I was about 190, maybe 185 at that time. It's okay. It was okay for the kids, but it sucked for me.
Yeah.
So I'm supposed to run an ad on this thing, right? And I basically sent the rep an email. I said, I don't think I can endorse this.
Right.
Well, we'll just read the script. Well, no. Because if my audience goes out and buys this Casper mattress and they get it and they say it sucks. Now, how many people that were running Casper ads actually slept in that mattress?
Yeah, right.
So,
and I guess you would need to really have that reference point to recommend it, right?
So I walked away from probably 10 grand, but I didn't run the ad. And they didn't ask me to send the mattress back. You know what I did with the mattress? I put it on Craigslist and sold it. I'm not kidding. So,
Wow.
yeah, I don't think Casper's advertising in podcast anymore, but maybe maybe they're not even in business anymore. But
No, they are, I think.
Okay.
Yeah.
But
I'm pretty sure they are.
But I just couldn't do it. My conscience wouldn't let me get beyond the fact that this thing sucked. Because you know what would I have said during the ad? Well, my kids love it.
Mm-hmm.
They're enjoying it. I couldn't have endorsed it myself.
Right.
So, yeah. All right.
Casper's still up and running. They've got beds online. I just looked them up.
Okay. So, well.
Yeah. See why our customers love Casper is what it says on there.
We are T minus 4 minutes and 18 seconds. I do have the SpaceX stream up now.
Mm-hmm. Okay.
So
was it on the screen that our viewers are seeing?
Yeah, it's what our viewers are seeing right now. And for those of you listening later, you will already have known if this thing blew up or went to. Anyway. We'll come back to it when it in 3 minutes and 50 seconds here. So let's go ahead and move on to the next slide.
Mm-hmm.
Podcast advertising, agree, disagree. When price and quality equal, you prefer to buy products from companies that advertise on or sponsor the podcast you regularly listen to. 2019, 43% agree. 2020, 46%. That's good. That's a nice tick up.
Yeah.
But I just, it's still surprising me that number is still that low.
Right. What was it in 2018 and 2017? That's what I'd like to see.
Here's the next one. Podcast advertising, agree, disagree. You pay more attention to advertising on podcasts than on other forms of media, 44, 48. They have to. They're right. We're in their ear.
Right.
Podcast advertising, agree, disagree. You appreciate podcast advertisers for supporting your favorite podcast, 60 to 64. So I think that I'm surprised that number's not higher either.
Yeah.
I really do.
Well, it speaks to a little bit of, people are feeling, I don't know, trepidatious about advertising in podcasts, I think is what that tells me.
Do you currently have a paid subscription to any paid internet-only music streaming service such as Pandora Premium, Spotify, 64%, any audiobook service such as Audible, 40%. I'm shocked at that number. 40% of people actually have an Audible subscription. Sirius XM satellite radio, 36%. By the way, Howard Stern was extended for another 5 years.
Yeah, I saw that.
And any of these, 76%. So that's a pretty high number. So that they're still on the streaming music. I guess I'm not so surprised about the streaming music piece here. Is anything else? I keep switching back, Rob, because we're 2 minutes out from either launch or blow up.
I mean, given that 40% number, it definitely makes sense for Audible to have added podcasts to their catalog. Yeah.
Which of the following best describes the most important reason why you currently have a paid subscription to an audio listening service? 2020, 43% for more control over the content you're listening to, 36% for access to content you can't get for free, and 21% to hear fewer ads. Down from 22.
Mm-hmm.
That's interesting. All right, let me see where we're at here. Oh, what's going on with my stream? They held it 2 minutes and 6 seconds.
Something else?
I don't know. I guess we'll find out. Where did Watch Now go? There it is. Just making sure my YouTube stuff wasn't froze. Oh, yeah. Hold at 206.
Something happened. Something happened. Something went sideways.
They didn't hold at 206 last time. let's see here. Let's go back to the presentation. Do you currently have a paid subscription to any internet-only television streaming service such as Netflix, Amazon Prime Video, or Hulu? 87%. Any premium cable show? 48%, like HBO Showtime. Any live TV streaming service such as Sling TV, DirecTV, Hulu with Live TV, YouTube TV? 48%. Any of these? 92%. Wow.
There's always been a strong correlation between heavy podcast listeners and people's propensity to subscribe to other digital content, right?
Yeah.
That's been the case since the early days of the medium.
So I think
These aren't surprising.
This is, this describes me in entirety.
Right, and I saw it years and years ago. I saw a strong correlation between, this is back when I was working on Zune at Microsoft. When we added podcasting to the Zune music service, I just saw a lot of mapping between people that listen to music and people that listen to podcasts.
Right.
So there was a lot of correlation there. That's why I always thought that eventually the music streaming services were going to add podcasts, just because there's such a strong crossover.
So going back, go ahead.
And then video on top of that, right? It is a whole other correlation that exists.
And then compared to other places where you might hear advertisements, does hearing an advertisement podcast make you 54% more likely to purchase a product in 2020, where it was 46 before? No effect, 49, and basically you want this number to go down, 40, so it went the right way.
Right.
Less likely.
9 points went down.
Yeah, less likely to purchase a product went up 1%. Why would someone say they'd be less likely to purchase a product there? Is that just spite?
Maybe that's a little bit of a uptick based on sensitivity to over advertising.
Podcast advertising, agree, disagree. Advertising a podcast is the best way for a brand to reach you. 2019, 37% agree. 2020, 49% agree. Now, this is a number.
So brand is the key takeaway.
Brand. Yeah, for brand to reach you.
It doesn't say product.
Right.
It says
brand. This is makes sense to me.
Mm-hmm.
I guess this is why there now is about 4,000, maybe more, podcast advertisers.
That's a big number.
It is. But some of them are only buying in one show. So.
Really?
Yeah. What is your opinion of podcast advertising that uses... Okay, so this is interesting. This is a good study, Tom. You guys did a good job on this. Personalized discussions about products or sponsors by the podcast host, 51%. Messages from advertisers are read live by the host, 51%. Sponsorship messages, 48%. Pre-recorded ads not read by the host, 36%. There's the delta. So what does 15% drop equate to in CPM?
Well, that's not necessarily, but that is certainly part of the programmatic issue, right?
Yeah.
That's not to say that you can't have, those live reads pre-recorded, and they can simulate.
They're just not going to be as effective.
Right. They may map. It says messages from advertisers that are live read by podcasts, right?
Yeah.
But what if those are pre-recorded, the live reads?
So what that really means, though, Rob, is 64% of people are not very favorable,
right,
of pre-recorded ads.
Right. I'm surprised that it didn't have that fourth column of pre-recorded host read ads.
Right.
I wonder why they didn't ask that question.
Yeah, that's a good question. Here's an update on SpaceX. Clock pause, standing by for new T-0. Oh, okay.
Mm-hmm. So the next slide, it really kind of summarizes what we were just saying. Right?
Oh,
33% strongly agree with either of these host read formatted ads. So, as a basis.
Yeah. Wow, look at that. 13. Oh, that's a low number. Pre-recorded ads not read by hosts, 13%.
Yeah, that's not a strong pitch for radio ads and podcasting.
No, not at all. Whoa.
If that's what they're talking about there, right?
You pay more attention, and it's over method. You pay attention to method than other types of advertising and podcast. So, You know,
sometimes the audience can't tell the difference between a pre-recorded ad if it's done well.
If it's done well, yeah, right? But if it's done well, then it won't be known as a pre-recorded. But a pre-recorded ad is typically Geico. You know, the Geico dude.
I mean, it's a radio spot.
It's a State Farm.
30,
it's the
15, 30, 60 second
farmers
by agencies.
Yeah, we've seen everything or whatever. You know,
right. Yeah. But there is another category here that's not being. I mean, unless sponsorship messages is that pre-recorded host read.
Yeah,
which it could be.
It says method are a good fit for podcasts. Personalized discussion about products and sponsors, 25% strongly agree. Message from advertisers that are read by live hosts, 23%. Sponsorship messages, 23%. Pre-recorded ads not read by the host, 17%. So,
yeah, I'd like to see what the research survey's definition of a sponsorship message and how that differentiates from a pre-recorded ad or a true host read ad.
Yep.
Yeah.
Let's see, where are we at? Okay. Companies that use method on podcasts understand how to reach people like you. 24, 23, 21, and 15. They understand how to reach you. It's interesting.
It's pretty much follows the same pattern.
Yep. So, key findings. Super listeners today listen to even more podcast content than last year. They are getting slightly younger and slightly more Latino. Last year, 37% of super listeners agreed that podcast ads are the best way to reach them. This year is 49%. Although quantity and length of ad breaks has increased, the positive impact of podcast advertising went up year over year. So there we go. We've talked all the way through that thing.
I would say in that last bullet, there's a little bit of a mixed reaction to that.
I think they spun it positive.
Right. There is a perspective that one can take that there's some concern that should be.
The old curmudgeons in us, well,
it's a glass. That big jump in numbers from 24 to 38% believe that there are too many ads already in podcasting. So I'd say, if we see next year that number goes up another 14%, then I think there should, I think the industry needs to take that and say, we need to make some adjustments. Or, like you said, Todd, we need to spread the inventory out across a larger number of shows and reduce the ad loads.
So for those of you, I'm going to assume that these were not interviews. I'm assuming this was an actual survey. Yeah,
it actually says the methodology at the very top of this.
Says, 4,000.
4,000 plus.
Oh, they did interviews. Updated third quarter 2020. National sample 13 plus online and offline. Trax Institute toppered in English and Spanish. 2,000 plus interviews fielded during COVID-19 disruption. That was during Share of Ear. To do interviews, do a qualitative study versus a quantitative study. Qualitative is very expensive.
Right. Well, my guess is what these questions were asked during the Share of Ear study that was done.
And then
and then they didn't release those numbers. And they're releasing those numbers. My guess is, and Tom needs to confirm this, they released those numbers in this study,
right?
But not for the general Share of Ear, right?
Yeah. Well, it's again.
So
I do want the definition.
SpaceX launch?
There's clock pause standing by for new T-0. So.
Oh, okay.
So, but they are venting. The rocket has been venting. And for those of you that don't know what's going on here with SpaceX, is they're actually going to fly the upper stage of the rocket. Now this would normally sit on the booster package of the suit, whatever that mat. When they shot that car into space, this would actually be sitting on top of that. So they're launching this solo. This stage will never really truly like fly when they do a launch on this. It's going to be sitting on top of something that's already given them a kickstart. So,
right.
But supposedly they're going to land this thing too. So it comes in nose first, and then they flip it over and land. Can you imagine having your butt in the seat and being in there and coming straight down at Earth at Mach 4 or whatever it is, and then all of a sudden they retro rocket and turn you around? That, my friends, is the e-ticket at Disney World. Do you guys know what the e-ticket is?
Yeah.
Only old people know what the e-ticket is from Disney World. Right. So anyway, they've denied me here some discussion during the show. Okay. Right. Anyway.
That's right. So did you see the podcast predictions for 2021 that came out of Pacific Content?
I didn't have the 30 minutes to read it.
I skimmed through it myself. I think we'll have to talk about it in a future episode after we've had time to digest it.
I actually labeled this show Podcast Predictions, and I didn't know we were going to do this, so I guess we'll have to do that in another show. Maybe we can do that next week.
Right.
It's because we aren't going to have a show on Saturday because I'm going to be seeing my new grandson in Tampa this weekend.
So we will be doing a show on the Wednesday.
Yeah,
right?
yeah. I'll be back Monday.
Well, then let's plan on doing the podcast predictions, and then we can talk about this article too.
All right. So that means I actually got to think about some predictions.
Well, I'm gonna be writing that stuff down. Actually, I already submitted stuff to a couple months ago to the Podcast Business Journal on my predictions. So I'll just probably extend on those.
All right. Well, I haven't. I don't write any predictions down anymore because, to be honest with you, it's about the same from year to year.
Yeah, it doesn't for me. It doesn't change that much either.
And I've got a few unfair predictions because I'm under NDA, so things I
can't
know
predict too much.
Yeah, because I know what's actually going to happen. Some things that are going to happen, but and here's the. Let me just say it this way. We've got lots of regional. All over the world, we have native-speaking streaming services and all kinds of things that support. Like if you think about, let's pick a country. Let's talk about Brazil,
India, or Russia, or any of these.
Yeah, wherever.
Countries, right.
So let's say Brazil. They've got a whole streaming service that does nothing but play, country-specific music along with some other stuff. So and we should talk about this next week, but that's where expansion is going to come, is those.
Right.
Though, podcasting is going to completely encompass the world on all these services because local content is starting to get to the point where there's enough to support, and plus they'll intermix English speaking or whatever, all international content, I guess.
Plus, I've been also saying for a few months now that I also think once we've saturated all that, I think we're going to see a growth in genre-specific platforms more than we have. I mean, I think we've seen some of it happen around like sports and things like that, but I think there's going to be more of a splintering of aggregation around ethnic groups, black podcasters, women podcasters, all that stuff is going to have its own vertical distribution platforms.
There, you niche it out. That's a way to gain very valuable audiences that are not being reached today.
Right. So just so you understand the analogy here, what we're talking about is most of the platforms that are launching today are platforms that are full of podcast content from every genre and every category of content. Right. What I'm talking about here is specific platforms that are targeted towards delivering content to a specific interest group or demographic or whatever that would take a subset of the podcasting space and just surface that to that community. that would be specific to that community's desires and needs.
And
So, right.
show my hand a little bit here, but anybody that wants to do that and wants to
Right.
manage a community should reach out to me.
Are you doing something like good?
Well,
for you
we've
to-
we've got a tool already that automates all that.
right.
Yeah, our network
So-
plugin that we built to do exactly that.
Right, but these platforms I think they're going. I mean, I'm working with a few already that they're going to be looked to as another distribution platform that
Right.
podcaster will submit to them, just
Right.
like they would to Apple. But
Yeah.
it'll have some acceptance requirements.
Criteria.
Right.
Yep.
Right.
Like I said, reach out to me if you're thinking about doing something like that.
Yeah.
Because I think you're absolutely right, Rob. And the key here is there's going to be a ground race to dominate those categories, whatever
Right.
they may be.
Because if you really think about it logically, these big platforms like Apple Podcasts and Google Podcasts, they're such big buckets of content, right? And how can any of those platforms really do a good job of surfacing terrific content in the various genre categories, right? It's like a huge pool of content, and it makes it really hard to find what's good. Well, if you have a subset of that in an affinity group, it's a lot easier to surface and market and promote shows that are good. So
it's incredibly easier because
right.
I built the first network,
Yeah.
and it's real easy to sell 100 tech shows.
And it's easier to market a platform like that to users,
Right.
because you have an interest.
Yeah, if they have a
there.
specific, they're looking at a specific stack. Yeah.
Yeah, and I think we're seeing a little bit today in the political genre. You're seeing some signs of it right now that are bubbling up, right?
Yeah. I have, and here's another thing too, and I don't know how much business you guys do with the government, but I've had probably 20 government agencies come on in the last 2 or 3 months that are, doing a show for their specific agency or Department of Justice or whatever it may be. They're doing a large number of different shows. So,
right.
I think that is. So, I just realized something, and of course, this is only viable to the people that are watching us right now. The SpaceX rocket, that just doesn't look that big sitting there, but that thing is mammoth. It's really big, and they need like a cherry picker to get to like halfway up the first spin. So tentative T-0 now, 4:40 p.m. CST. That means CST. So that means 5:40 Eastern is the new launch time. So Central Standard Time. So it's a ways. They must have had a problem.
Kind of sounds like it. There's a common thread here.
Yeah,
right?
but it didn't blow up yet.
So, well, what else has been going on? I think some of the news out there, it was put out there that the New York Times is making about $42 million a year in revenue from their podcasting.
Doesn't that piss off all the independent podcasters out there that they're making $42 million a year?
Right. And that's about comparable to the annual revenue of Wondery, which is a whole nother.
But that was an analysis. That was an analysis if numbers are to believe that they sold out every episode and how many ever ads they did.
Yeah. It could certainly be. It's just an estimate.
Yeah.
It's not for definite. It's not like the New York Times has put it out.
I don't know if I can say anything directly, but we had an IAB meeting today.
Yeah, we did.
And I better be real careful here. I think there's an update coming. I guess I'll leave it at that. After the review period, I think there's going to be. So, you have to be careful. Be careful on what I'm saying.
Right. I think there's some aspects of what's going on there that that the IAB podcast metrics kind of thing needs to put its stake in the ground here and move forward. Right.
Yep. So it's a good thing, but sometimes things. Let me just paraphrase this. Sometimes there's insufficient data to support certain specifications. And then when you do get to a point where you have sufficient data, then it can be added to the document. Do you think that's about as far as I want to go?
I think we saw a glimpse of it today, right? Of some data.
Right, some data.
That paints a directional picture for metrics for podcasting as you look to the future, and future protocols.
Right. Okay, I think we leave it at that.
Yeah, right.
But what's funny is here's the headline: podcasts are becoming a Hollywood gold mine. Reports Deadline, saying the number of podcasts turned into video is well into 3 figures. This, incidentally, is widely held to be the reason for the high valuations of some podcast companies.
I wonder which one of these might be referring to.
So podcasts are becoming a Hollywood gold mine. So in other words, they're going to be a podcast story will be made into a Hollywood feature, something, film, series, short story, whatever it may be. So it's going to keep the some writers employed, which is good.
Did you see this? Audible has launched their Audible podcast development program that a potential podcaster could win up to $10,000 to develop the idea for a show. And you have until January 18th, I guess, to apply.
When do you guys close for nominations for your, is that?
On the 15th of December.
Oh, so 6 days away for it to become what's it called? Ambi? Ambi's, yeah.
Ambi Award, right.
Yeah.
There's some talk of extending that deadline, but it hasn't been decided yet. So,
this is really a headline here that if you read this, you're going to think, I can take Christmas off. Podcast downloads in the U.S. dipped 20% in the past week, according to data from Triton Digital. It's all thanks to Thanksgiving. I actually, when I read this, I went over and looked at our stats. I did not see any dip. So zero dip. Matter of fact, saw just a tad bump. So I don't know where they got this. Maybe it's because they're hosting shows that weren't produced over the Thanksgiving period, and that's why there was a dip.
That's probably true. I mean, a lot more independent podcasters produce through holidays than
that's right.
The larger companies.
Yeah.
So that would make sense.
And don't forget, again, I've said this 100 times, December 15th to January 30th is your number one growth period in podcasting. So we're 6 days away from that. So make sure you're putting content out that is going to attract people that are going to be on vacation and looking to improve their lives and New Year's resolutions. And if you're doing a show, whatever it is, then you can do a little twist on that. Make sure you do so because they're going to be seeking your content out. Yep,
that's true.
Now,
because people get new tablets, they get new phones, they get new devices that they can listen to podcasts on. So that's why that happens.
I had a little bit of a giggle when I read the Howard Stern's extension on Sirius. Now, I've listened to Howard Stern from time to time, and he's definitely a shock jock, and he's, unbridled over there. But he says
he's going to have a podcast.
No, but he says this is the things that really kind of shocks me. Listen to this. American shock jock Howard Stern has signed for a further 5 years with Sirius. Now, I don't know what the deal is. I'm sure it's millions and millions. Who also retains rights to his archives for 7 years.
7 years, yeah.
So he doesn't own his archives.
Well, when you get as much money on a deal, kind of like Joe Rogan, same way.
Yeah.
Right.
They've got Stern has a warehouse or two full of props and stuff that's been sent to the show. They were talking about how they could get rid of all this stuff. Howard just said burn it, I think, at one time. But can you imagine having a warehouse full of stuff from us doing this show?
Right.
A warehouse, not like a storage unit, a warehouse.
Right. Right.
We can't fill a closet. Matter of fact, and don't forget stickers. If you got a sticker for your show, send it to the sticker address the address that's in the show notes at newmediashow.com, and make sure that if you're not subscribed, you do subscribe. Because Rob, we are 54 seconds from being at the 1 hour and 30-minute mark.
Wow, amazing how we got here.
Well, the show's not an hour 30 because we started about 5 after, but the recording says an hour 25, but I think we're about good.
Mm-hmm.
Anything else?
Yeah, I did a live audio program on a new platform called Clubhouse just a couple days ago. Had about 300 or 400 people in a room on this new app called Clubhouse. All podcasters, is huge, diverse group of people that are on that platform that wanted to learn all about podcasting. I answered questions from this group for almost 2 hours.
Wow.
Just one after another coming through asking questions about podcasting on this live audio program on this platform.
Huh. So did you get invited? You get invited to come over there and do a segment or something?
Mm-hmm.
Huh.
Yeah. Yeah. There's a couple of platforms that are getting involved in this. One's it's a Clubhouse app is what it's called. And it's all audio. So it's a very social platform that is all about audio and people coming in and talking to each other, hitting, a talk button, and you can talk to, a session host and create a dialogue. You can stage people to come into a room and ask questions and things like that. And then there's another app called Chalk, and that's CALK, and that's also another app that you can go in and create an audio program and build a community of listeners around that app, and people can talk to each other in that app in like a show type format.
So they're saying it's a secret invite only social app. Is that true?
Yeah.
Huh.
Yeah. I mean, at this point, until they open it up more.
Right.
So
they could actually ask you a question that you heard them. They didn't type it. You could actually hear them ask a question.
Right. It's almost like talk radio, right? You could bring in a guest on the show. So there was myself, and I was a guest, and there was a host, and the audience would be attracted via like social media, like what happens on other social platforms where you have a bunch of friends and followers and stuff like that, and you can invite them to this room to talk about whatever you want to talk about.
So what kind of questions did you get? They run the full gamut?
Yeah, about how to start podcasts, how to monetize podcasts, how to grow a podcast, just all sorts of levels of questions, So I thought it was interesting that there's this whole other generation of apps coming up that are bringing audience and hosts together more in conversation, which really hasn't been done that well in podcasting up to this point, and it's not really a podcast either. So And from what I understand, this platform is going to enable recording of this as well. So you may be able to create an on-demand version of this because it was just live at this point. So it's an interesting development around audio content production to be able to have a social media combined. And this is what I've wondered about with Facebook and Twitter and these other LinkedIn and stuff, is creating those platforms could create something very similar to this. They just haven't done it.
So and one thing we didn't get to in the show today, maybe we can take just a few minutes, is talking about Joe Rogan and not being a podcast anymore.
Yeah. Well,
so do you think people?
There's a faction of the podcast space out there that I think is a little bit more open-minded on that topic now. Right. as we're starting to see exclusives become more common in the podcasting space.
Yeah.
They've been around forever, but now it feels like it's more accepted than ever before. And then I think that the definition of a podcast is maybe in perception of the listener is moving a little bit beyond just the distribution method now. I don't know what you think, Todd.
So here's a quote from Dave over at Chartable. Closed versus open. As Spotify expands their suite of exclusive content and others like Amazon and Apple enter the fray, we'll begin to see more competition between closed platforms and the open RSS-based ecosystem. I believe the open ecosystem can continue to thrive. Competition is healthy after all, but the open ecosystem will need to continue to innovate as an industry to serve listeners, creators, and advertisers as well. That's a quote from Dave over at Chartable. So that kind of goes into it, but it really doesn't say, it doesn't really define, he is not defining, he doesn't say that those on closed platforms are no longer podcast.
Right. And I think that cuts to the chase of the question, right? Is the word podcast a reference to kind of a type of content, or is it a reference to the method of distribution? And I think that's where it feels like we're opening it up. I mean, as we've seen more, StreamYard and Zoom and stuff, people creating podcasts in those platforms and they're live, just like what we're doing here, Todd.
Right.
We're not a pure play podcast either.
Well, we're a podcast in that it's still distributed as a podcast, but we do it live.
Right, exactly.
Yeah.
And that's where the understandings and the perceptions are kind of getting a little blurred, right?
So,
because there are people that are starting shows and all they're doing them is live. So are those podcasts?
So here's an antidote
to
this. It's a side-off discussion, and I think it's important. I had a slew, probably 20, 25 podcasters contact me and say, how do I become a video podcast? It came all at once. And I'm like, what's going on? And I'm like, why don't you set up a separate show? You can do audio and video. Turns out everyone saw Rogan's show as a video on Spotify. And he wants his podcast to be video on Spotify. And every one of those inquiries, I kind of got the clue after 2 or 3. And I said, that's an exclusive deal. An average podcaster's audio only. Joe's got a special arrangement with Spotify to do video on the platform. That's not something that's openly available. But
given that, there is some podcasting platforms that do support the video stuff. Like
that's
Apple,
Apple Podcasts. And I explained that. And I explained how I'd done my show for 10 years and it's distributed as both. And then I said, listen, I said, realistically, I said, your show will not fit on the flat rate plan. You'll have to become a pro hosting customer. And that incurs gigabit costs beyond what we allow on your base allowance. And I said, if you want to experiment with live video, do like I do it on Facebook, YouTube Live, take the embed, put it on your blog post. And if you get some traction, then consider doing video as a podcast, but understand this is what it's going to ding, ding, ding cost. And he said, well, I think I'm going to hold up for now. But there was a bunch of people, man, they wow, I can do video on Spotify. Let me in. And I'm like, time out.
Nope.
Time out. No can do.
Places, but just not Spotify.
No can do.
Right.
And I said, what's the and what is the fascination? Why? It's like, oh my God, it's the shiny little lure, spinning through the water. And it's like, oh, let me go up there and grab that hook, and yeah.
I mean, in the early days of podcasting, video was a lot more popular than it is now.
Yeah.
Believe it or not.
Yeah. So we are now officially way over time-wise, so we're going to get out of here. I'm Todd at Blueberry.com, at Geek News on Twitter.
And I'm on Twitter, too, at Rob Greenlee. And you can send me an email if you want to robg@libsyn.com.
So if you're not subscribed, go over to thenewmediashow.com, get subscribed to the show. All your favorite destinations are there. Make sure you're subscribed. We want you to do that because we are old school podcasters, and please subscribe. So,
and I think, Todd, you dove into the numbers, and you came out with a number as like 20% of our downloads are video downloads, right?
Yeah.
Right. So that gives you a little bit of a snapshot of what's maybe possible.
Yeah. And again, 20% is a pretty big number considering why would you watch two dudes
talking on big microphones?
All right. Yeah. So that's why do you watch? That's the question. You can email either one of us and let us know. And of course, love to hear your feedback on the manscaping thing. Should we have them as? I think we should have them as a sponsor, and then Rob be the test user. I'm already a user, so I can we can.
Oh, you are. Wow.
I told you I have their product. I have their version 0 of their trimmer.
Oh, okay. Yeah, I haven't picked one up yet. So, but I did get a new Apple Watch today.
Oh, nice.
Came in.
I just took mine off, so
I've been trying to get it all set up. So
it takes a whopping 3 minutes or something. But
yeah, it's a pretty tricky little device. I got the cellular version. So it's got its own little thing going on.
So you got to call your phone company and link it.
No, it does it in the software now.
Really?
It sets it all up with the AT&T.
Okay, that's cool.
Right there, I just click a button and it's done.
So when you upgrade, you'll have to call your phone company. At least I did.
Upgrade to what? What do you mean?
When you upgrade your iPhone, mine didn't relink. They had to relink it because
when you get a new iPhone.
Yeah. But I switched SIM cards at the same time, so...
Yeah, I'm not going to get a new iPhone probably till next year.
All right, so you're good for a while.
Yeah.
Okay, everyone. Thanks for being here. No show on Saturday. No show. I'm going to be in sunny Florida and eating out.
Sounds good.
Yeah, at a restaurant that's open.
Wow.
Yes, fantastic. So...
Todd, I think we forgot to mention that Podfest Asia happened a couple days ago.
Did we hear anything about it?
Well, I heard a little bit about it, and they posted some videos from it. I thought that was interesting.
What's the website? Do you know?
Well,
or just Google Podfest Asia.
Yeah, I would say Podfest Asia. Just do a Google search. It's actually a lot of the sessions are on YouTube. So
that's cool.
You can check them out.
All right, everybody. We'll see you next Wednesday. Next Wednesday, we'll be back.
Next Wednesday, right?
Yeah. For those of you that listen, you don't care. You just get it in your feed. Those of you who are subscribed. But everyone else, thanks. Take care. We'll see you next time.
Thank you. Bye.
Bye-bye.